All right, here we are at the Allen Chadwick Garden, UCSC, about 3.8 miles inland from the ocean, the Pacific, at about 800-foot elevation. It's February, it's winter, but it won't be for long in our climate. Let's talk about things about, yeah, sure, dormancy. You note behind me there's a block of apples here. Actually, there's about 150 apples in an acre or so, half an acre or so here in dormancy, and yet to be pruned. So I just find it helpful if you know how a tree grows, which parts grow when, and that informs you as per how to take better care of your trees. So let's look at the yearly growth cycle. And we can use this chart here, which is from a book I wrote called Fruit Trees for Every Garden, 10-Speed Press. And it's called the yearly growth cycle. So let's look at a couple aspects of this. That would be, let's look at the top chart here. The vertical axis is rate of growth, and horizontally we have the seasons. So you come out into the orchard in, say, when there's active growth in the spring, and you say, oh, lovely, the trees are all growing. And they are and they aren't. Different parts of the tree grow at different rates and at different points throughout the season. This top chart represents this. Let's just quickly go through the various lines here, and let's then break it down and say, well, what's going on in the trees and what might you do to facilitate their growth? Let's look at the root curve here, which I think some call it a double sigmoid curve. Looks a lot like the roller coaster down at the boardwalk to me, either way. We look at these trees behind us. They're dormant, or I think a more apt term would be quiescent. They're not doing nothing, even though that's bad English. The roots are, in this mild climate, about to get active. And one other important thing is roots store an enormous amount of carbohydrates and nutrients during the winter, which imparts cold tolerance to the tree overall, but also is shuttled, translocated early in the spring, as indicated by this steep rise in activity in the root curve here, to go to all parts of the tree to fuel growth. Wherever you live, about 3 to 5 weeks before you see any above ground visible activity, even bud swell, let alone flowering and leafing out, the roots are active. They are active, and tree roots can grow at fairly cold temperatures compared to annual flowers and vegetables. I use 50 degrees Fahrenheit as a cutoff point for annual flowers and vegetables. I call it biological zero. That's just a term I made up. It's not an official term. Below that, even though conditions are good in the soil, it's too cold, there's not much growth. But fruit trees, as they originated from really northern frigid climates, for instance. Apples are from the mountains, the Tian Shan Mountains in Kazakhstan. Pears from the Caucasus Mountain between the Black and the Caspian Sea at elevation. Peaches and apricots from northwest China. Okay, they originated in really cold climates. And so they have developed strategies for survival. The principal one is dormancy. The tree will both in mid-late summer start to take the byproducts of photosynthesis, sugars, and store them in their roots for overwintering. Again, this imparts cold tolerance, and then to shuttle them throughout the tree early in the spring. And dormancy doesn't really just initiate as we casually observe, oh, look, the trees are losing their leaves, it's fall, they're going dormant. It is one of the steps along the way. Dormancy itself actually originates in late summer variously. And it's a point at which the tree will stop making branch extension, and it's often evidenced by the tip or terminal bud being a fat one, as you see here, and it is in truth on its way to becoming a flower fruit bud. That's an indicator that those branches aren't going to grow anymore, and yet you're still in mid-late summer. Then the fruit will come off the tree, harvest. And then at that juncture, mid-late summer, until the tree does upsize or lose its leaves in the fall, what the tree is doing is it's taking the byproducts of photosynthesis, sugars again largely, and moving them to the roots and the inner bark in trunk and branch to store to redistribute in the spring. So let's just look again at the period of growth and the rate of growth of root, shoot, leaf, and fruit. The roots start off in a ginormous manner. The rate of growth, again, this is 3 to 5 weeks before you see anything above ground. Roots are getting busy distributing resources, nutrients, water, and carbohydrates to all other parts of the tree, and it happens extremely rapidly. But as you see, it's also in a condensed period of time. By mid-spring, its root growth and that distribution of resources is basically finished, or it's peaked, and it's starting to taper off till you get to the middle of summer, where it's at a low ebb. Now, this doesn't mean that roots aren't growing and taking up water. It's just that distribution of resources has happened at a rapid rate, reached a peak, and has subsided to a low peak. And then after the fruit comes off the tree, mid-late summer, variously with different species of fruit, there's a slight second uptick in root activity and then dormancy. And again, this suits the needs of the tree. Again, these trees are from very northern latitudes, frigid areas, have short, compressed growing seasons. So it's really in those, and it's still in the modern trees' DNA. It's not a leisurely stroll. It's not a long distance race. It's a madcap sprint. Go from dormancy, root growth, flowering, fruit set, leafing out, shoot growth, get your fruit mature before the frosts come in the fall. Just go lickety-split like that. So, so root growth follows this pattern here. And if you look now down at the lower chart, this is the way it is. This is the way you really want it to be. And we'll get to the why. How does this happen in a minute? But this is a carbohydrate reserves in the tree chart. And you basically start off, as you see here, with a high level. Higher is better. And then very rapidly it declines and is at a low ebb, and then has a second uptick. So it's kind of the opposite of the root growth curve here. The roots are growing, distributing carbohydrates, the reserves are being depleted, and then repleted in the late summer, fall for the next year. So that's how roots grow. And then the way it works in terms of the order of growth of the parts of the tree, roots, and then flowers, and then hopefully pollination and fruit set, and then leaf growth, and then branch growth like that. And in fact, one of the why I say trees aren't fully dormant in the winter, there's some root activity even in all but the coldest climates. And what's happening inside the branches in the winter is the finishing up of flowers that will emerge in the spring and get pollinated and set fruit. And that initiation of those flower buds happened the previous spring, early mid-spring. And it's slowly moving along internally. Let's look at shoot growth here. Shoots grow after roots initiate growth, and usually after both flowering and leafing out. And again, the rate is considerable. This is a curve for pome fruits, apples and pears. This is a curve slightly different for stone fruits, but the rate of growth is rapid and the period of time is compressed. And then shoots stop growing like that. So how well a tree does in any given year is somewhat to largely a function of how well did you tend that tree the last year, particularly in this late summer phase. If you were on your game, watering, weeding, even fertilizing, the tree's healthy, the leaves are big, flat, and fat, you will photosynthesize at a great rate, you will manufacture sugars and store them for the next year. And so that's a little overview of how things go. Down at the bottom here, let's tick off some of these things. Spring through early summer equals what the old pomologists in the 19th and early 20th century, principally among them, a man named William Henry Chandler, who was the dean of pomology variously at Berkeley, Davis, and UCLA, and Riverside too. And he had all this marvelous terminology. And he referred to this period in the spring into early summer where roots are active, shoots are active, leaves are active, flower and fruit is active, as the grand period of growth. Cool. And then, as stated previously, roots are growing actively here, shoots are growing, and shoots make almost their yearly growth in a very short compressed period, maybe 8, 10, 12 weeks, spring into midsummer. Flowering, fruit set, and fruit development happens as you see here, you know, on the heels of root growth, but in spring into early summer. And then it's very important that the tree is fortified with reserves, carbohydrates, nutrients within the tree, nutrients and water taken up from the soil, because in this time period, spring into early summer, which would equate to on the heels of flowering and petal drop and fruit set on various fruits, internally unspecialized cells are differentiating into the beginnings of next year's flowers that will give you a crop in that next year. So to the degree you can, in general, in care, because there's such a frenzy of activity and compressed growth amongst the components of the tree in a short period, spring and early summer, as soon as you can get out into the orchard and deal, and by deal I mean if you've got a cover crop, drop it, chop it, flip it into the soil. If you're applying compost or nutrients, do it as soon as you can to both facilitate this upsurge in growth and to compensate this drawdown of carbohydrate reserves. And then you might consider doing it again in this period here in the late summer, fall, as indicated by the uptick of root growth here, and hopefully the uptick of carbohydrates for storage over winter to start the following year off with a bang.